welcome back to my channel, and I have another nightmare of a tutorial for you because it was a nightmare to make in 3 days, as well as a nightmare to try to edit this video to make it make sense on how you can make it yourself. So without further ado, I'm going to be showing you how to make your very own nightmare monster hand. This thing! Yee! Yeah! And it's a little big for me. I actually can't bend my arm, but that's because it was actually made for a male who wears the whole armor set. Not me, I'm a little small, but you get the idea. And this build, it did take me 3 days. Do not make it in 3 days. I had to rush it. It did spend some time making it. It will turn out a lot better. But I had to make this in 3 days because I had to fly with it to go to Monsterpalooza in California, which means this bad boy also had to disassemble so it could fit in a suitcase. But before I show you how to make this, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. I'd love to have you as part of our cosplay community here. So, let's begin. And first up, you're gonna need tools and materials to make it. And here's everything that I used. I'll have links to everything in the description, as well as you can get my pattern on my website for this monster hand, TiffanyGordonCosplay.com. Starting off with the interior hand part that is labeled on the pattern. You will want to trace those two parts out onto your 10mm foam. This will be parts Z, as well as 2 for the attach on top of and bottom of Z part. And then we will heat treat it before cutting it out with an X-Acto knife. As well as you will notice that on that pattern, part Z, there are 2 circle parts. You need to cut those out, and I use Cost Tools hole drills. Those are the perfect size. And I will note that the holes are in 2 separate spots, so make sure you are labeling which side is which for left and right. And these holes are what your 3/4 inch CPVC pipe will insert into, and this is actually, when we have the monster hand fully complete, is the rod that your hand is going to be holding onto inside of it. Then apply contact cement glue to both the edges of Z, as well as to the top part of the attachment piece. Wait for the glue to dry, and then stack together. Then put that to the side and we'll work on the exterior hand part. And these 2 parts are also going to be cut out of 10mm foam. You will need 1 for the long strip, as well as 2 for the very large piece that says exterior hand top and bottom. As well as for that long strip, you will want to cut out the rectangular slot that says slot for interior hand, as well as on this piece, there are vertical lines, and you will need to score each of those so that way your piece will bend correctly. And when I say score, you're going to want to cut along that line at a 45-degree angle, rotate it 180 degrees, and cut along that line again at a 45-degree angle, making sure not to pierce all the way through the foam, and this will leave a triangle-like shape of foam that will be able to easily remove. And then for the 2 edge pieces at the end, you will need to also sand those at a 45 so they connect properly. We can then glue them together. Again, we're going to apply the contact cement glue to the long parts of the rectangular piece, as well as to the top parts of our exterior hand top and bottom. Then when it's dry, attach the rectangle to the bottom piece, following which part aligns, so finger 1 to finger 1, finger 2 to 2, and thumb to thumb. And for me, because this hand had to be transportable and I had to fly with it, I did end up needing to cut holes to all of the locations of the fingers and thumbs. And again, I used the Cost Tool hole drill, but I highly recommend not doing this and making these hands attach permanently. But if you want to make it transportable, I'll explain how I did that with this method. And again, we're going to be using 3/4 inch CPVC pipes, and these holes were for them to insert into, and these are basically going to be the connection parts for each of our fingers to attach onto. But if you don't want to have it transportable and come apart, don't do this step. It's so much extra work. But once they were kinda in place, they're not permanently attached yet, I'll note, then I got our interior handpiece, making sure the top part was facing up and our left was facing left, right was facing right. And then you're going to want to apply contact cement glue to the bottom part, as well as to the inside part of our exterior hand where that rectangle piece is. Wait for your glue to dry, and then you will attach the two pieces, aligning the whole together. And because I made this in 3 days, I kind of missed a few steps with filming. So what I ended up doing was I inserted the pipes all the way so they would touch the interior of our handpiece, and I glued them together with contact cement glue, and then I added a little bit of foam around it just to make sure that they held in place. I also did this for the interior handle part, and you can see the tiny bit of black foam that I have there as well. And that will just prevent the pipe from moving back and forth. Followed by attaching the top part to fully encase this piece. And I felt at this point it needed a little bit more dimension. If you look at the palm of your hand, it's not just perfectly flat, you have a little bit of roundness in certain spots. So I kind of want to imitate that with this hand, and I ended up cutting these kind of weird shapes out of 10mm foam, gluing it on top, and then also cutting roughly the shape of the palm a little bit larger out of 4mm foam, and then glued it on top, making sure to score underneath in the center so that way it would kind of bend around and give this little bump part indentation of the hand, followed by sanding the edges ever so slightly so that way it kind of had a little bit more roundness and wasn't so sharp. And then moving on to the knuckle part. And these parts are going to be out of 4mm HD foam. They're going to be parts S, T, and R on my pattern, as well as the attach assemble piece. And you will also need to do these all 2 times, as you will want a left and a right one. And just like before, all of the lines that are on these pieces, you will need to score, again following each line as a guideline and scoring it at a 45-degree angle halfway through the foam in one direction, rotating 180 degrees and following that same line again at a 45-degree angle, and this will allow you to remove that triangle-like shape of foam, and you will be able to bend your piece into the correct shape. As well as all of the edges for S and T, you will need to sand at a 45-degree angle using your Dremel and your sanding drum. Then apply your contact cement glue to all of the edges, wait for it to fully dry, and we can start assembling. Starting at one side and using our table to lay them flat together and slowly bending them together. And it should start to form this weird funky ass shape. And part R is going to then be glued underneath the now attached 2 pieces to its labeled location. And then our attached assembled piece that we cut out, that should be to the side, you will want to apply glue onto the top part or close to all of the edges, as well as to the bottom edge of our now STR assembled piece. Wait for the glue to dry, and then we can start attaching them together. And this is what is really going to hold your bended shape to this correct form. And if you get off a little bit, it's okay. You can always go to your workbench and sand them so they are flush. But once you're happy with the shape, I then got the hand traced where I wanted it to lay, and then applied my contact cement glue to both the parts, again, waited for it to dry, and attached them together. And onto the head part, and I'll note that for me when I was making this, it looked like a demon goat thing on the hand, so that's kind of why it's labeled horns and head and things like that, but yeah. And for these, you will be cutting part U and V out of 10mm foam and gluing those 2 on top of each other. And for parts W, X, and Y, you will cut these out of 4mm foam. And for X and Y, you will score the lines, as well as sand your edges all at a 45-degree with your sanding drum, followed by attaching parts X to Y with contact cement glue and capping it at the end with W. And this piece is what will attach on top of V now. Then for the horns. And these are going to be parts M through Q on my pattern, and you will need to cut them out twice, so one for the left and one for the right horn, out of 4mm foam. And each of these pieces, you are going to add contact cement glue to the short edges, wait for the glue to dry, and we are going to connect them and make a donut out of. And here's what each of the 5 pieces should look like once they are attached together. And when bending foam around in a donut-like shape, sometimes the edges get a little wonky, so I highly recommend going back to your sanding area and sanding all of the edges flat. That way they are parallel to your table, and then apply contact cement glue to each of those edges and assemble them together, connecting M to N to O, O to P, and lastly P to Q, which should look something like this. Then you're gonna grab the bottom parts, which should both be M, and where that seam is, I applied contact cement glue and attached the 2 seams together so the horns would now be connected. And then we can attach our headpiece to our horn pieces. And I'll note, before doing this, I traced where it was going to lay on the horns, as well as for the head part, I did end up sanding all of the edges so they weren't so sharp. But I applied contact cement glue and attached it on top, as well as these horns are still going to be really bulky at the bottom. So I did apply contact cement glue to the inside part of each of those horns, and when it was glued, I smushed it all flat, and this is going to make it so it'll attach to the hand a lot easier. And then I had to add my connection pieces because this part also detaches from the hand, and again, I don't recommend doing this. It is much stronger and better to permanently attach this piece on top of our hand part. But for making it detachable, I still had to do this, so I ended up getting the Costools hole drill and cutting out 2 holes again for my size 3/4 inch CPVC pipes, glued the pipes in place, as well as I kind of pushed on top of the hand where it would attach to leave an indentation so I knew where to punch those holes out of the top part of the hand. And then onto the fingers and the thumb. And we're pretty much going to be following a similar process that we did for the horns. All of these parts you're going to want to cut out of 4mm HD foam, which is for the thumb parts A through F. And then for finger 1 and 2, these are going to be parts G through L. I will note you will need to cut fingers 1 and 2 out twice, so you have a set for finger 1 and a set for finger 2. And we're also going to be making donut-like shapes with these. Applying contact cement glue to each of these small edges, waiting for the glue to dry, and attaching them together to make all of these donuts. As well as make sure all of your edges are now going to be perfectly parallel with the table, and if not, then go back and sand all of them flat like I did. And then for assembling, starting with our thumb, and you're going to grab part A, and you're gonna also grab the circle that we cut out, which is part B. Apply your glue to the labeled area of A, as well as to the bottom side of B, and then attach the 2 together. And this will close off one side. Then put that to the side and connect C to D, D to E, and capping it with F. And the last piece is then connecting that now C through F piece on top of B. And yes, it is supposed to be smaller and not perfectly aligned on top of that piece. And now for the fingers. And I started by connecting I to H and then H to G. And then working the opposite way, connecting J to K, and then connecting those 2 pieces to the top part of I. Again, it's supposed to be smaller. And then capping off L on top of it. And I'll note that L is supposed to be a lot larger, so I recommend tracing where it touches on the piece. That way you know where to apply your contact cement glue to finish out the finger. Now again, because I have to travel with this piece, I did have to do a few extra steps, which meant I had to close off the bottom of each of these fingers. And for this, I ended up cutting out 10mm foam, slightly tapering it so it was smaller on the inside, and then closing off the bottom of each of these fingers and thumbs. But if you do not plan on the fingers and thumb being detachable, skip this step. And then one more time with Costtool's hole drill to cut out the spot where my pipe would insert into. Now, again, if you are not making it transportable, don't do this step. Instead, this is going to be where you will get your thumb and your fingers, trace the exact spot that you want it to attach onto the hand part, the palm part, where they are located, and then use contact cement glue onto the bottom part of each of the fingers, as well as to the connecting point, wait for the glue to dry, and then attach them. This is going to give you the best results and make it so it does not come apart. And your hand should pretty much look like this when it's all together as the base foam construction. Now for details with foam clay, and to make it really monstery and gross and add all of this nice texture to it. And if you haven't used foam clay before, you do need to do a few steps before putting your foam clay onto your foam. And the only step you need to do is apply water to the foam surface. And then you can grab the foam clay and put it on top of your HD foam. I highly recommend covering each section first with the foam. And when working with this foam clay, you want to make sure it does not get dry. When it gets dry, it will harden. So you want this to stay moist and malleable. So I always have a cup with water and a paintbrush, and I just keep adding some water to slowly cover the whole piece. Then when you want to go and start adding details, wait for it to slowly not be super wet, and you can grab some clay sculpting tools and slowly start to add your details. We can also add some height by adding more foam clay in pieces and working back and forth. And once you're happy with the result, let it sit out for at least 24 to 48 hours, depending on the thickness that you put, the amount that you put of foam clay on top of the piece, and you are done. Now for painting! And here are all of the tools and materials that I used for painting Nightmare's monster hand. And side note, if you don't have an airbrush, you can always paint this by hand with a paintbrush, as well as you can still use the airbrush paint, or I recommend using Liquitex heavy body acrylic paint to paint it as a substitute. And with all foam pieces, I always recommend to prime it, because this is going to give you the best results, and it's going to also help your foam stay together properly. And for this, I use Plasti-Dip. You're going to want to apply a heavy coat onto the entire surface, and this is what is going to structurally help hold it together, make sure the foam clay doesn't come off as well, and give you just an even, consistent shine throughout the piece. And then you're going to wait for that coat to dry at least 45 minutes, and you're going to repeat this. You want to in total apply 3 to 4 coats of Plasti-Dip onto all of the surfaces, and then wait 24 hours before we start to actually paint the piece. And for painting, I'm going to be using airbrush paint that was provided by Createx Colors, specifically using their opaque line as well as their Candy 2.0 line. And I'm going to be using my HP TH2 airbrush as well as my compressor provided by Iwata, starting with our base coat onto everything, and that's going to be cream. And the reason for doing this is we're going to be layering tons of paint on top of this, and we want the under layers to be lighter so that way they'll glow more when we put the other ones on top. And then our next layer I did was a mixture of the opaque cream as well as brown, mixing them together. And then where the real fun comes in, and I'm going to be grabbing the Candy 2.0 paint color Dirt Track Brown. And we're actually going to be doing this more as a wash. And what I mean by that is we're going to use the airbrush and apply it on top of the surface heavily so it is extra watery and drippy. And while it is still wet, we're going to grab our paper towel and wipe it away. This is where it's going to be your wash, basically. And it's going to make it so the color is going to be darker in the creases and where all our texture is, and where the paper towel is wiping it away, it's going to be lighter and highlights more. And this is how we're going to start building our layers. And again, with building more layers, I did want to make this darker in areas. So with the Candy Dirt Track Brown, I did end up adding a bit of cream and jet black to the mix. And those were of the Wicked line. Again, applying it and while it was still wet, wiping it away. And for Nightmare's skin tone, there was also some other colors coming in, specifically this weird like yellowy kind of pussy-like colors to me. So I did this with a mix of cream and yellow oxide. And then with a dry paintbrush, just kind of wiped it on top of the surface. You don't want to push hard on this, you just want it to hit the highlighted areas, and this is going to start that glowing effect and start looking really nasty. And I did this in a few layers, depending on how light I wanted some areas to go. I would apply a few coats, having it more on the whiter side. And then for some of the other areas, I would go in just with the yellow oxide, again, just applying it in some layers. So just have fun and kind of play back and forth. As well as I went in to more of where the bending parts were of these finger joints with the Candy 2.0 black color. Again, this color is going to be really liquidy, so you want to go very light with it. And then for the favorite part, making it bloody. And he has this like kind of red glow to not just the palm of the hand, but to the joints that really kind of just make it feel nasty. So I used Candy 2.0 Blood Red and applied this onto all of the crevices. I will note that I forgot to film this part, but I also hand painted the palm of the hand with the paintbrush as well with this blood red color. And I really didn't apply anything underneath it but that cream, so that's what really made this bright, vibrant red of the palm that I had. But after waiting for all of the paint to finally dry, I went back with our sealer, which is going to be Createx Colors UVLS Matte. And this is a clear coat that is going to protect all of your paint from the sun, from the UV rays, as well as because we were using two different types of airbrush paint, the shine is going to be different. So by applying this on top, it's going to give an even matte shine to the entire piece rather than having these awkward highlighted parts and this more matte part. It's gonna look consistent now. And that will complete the paint job of the hand. Beginning of this video, I had to fly with this, which means this hand had to come apart, and as you can see, it's quite large and it does not fit in a suitcase, but I had to make it fit in one. So first, each of the fingers comes off, and it's just a pipe with a hole, nothing fancy. And now I have a nub. Haha. And then this piece right here, it also is connected with a pipe, two to be precise. As well as I did add a little extra support of Velcro, so that way it just didn't wobble back and forth. And here's the rest of our little nub that fit in my suitcase. So in total, it comes apart into 5 pieces for transportation. And that, guys, is how I made my Nightmare monster hand. Rawr! Ah! And I hope you found this video helpful for making your own version for bringing nightmare alive from Soulcalibur? And if so, let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you, as well as don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel, as your support here is really helpful with the cosplay community. A big thank you to all of my company sponsors, as well as all of my members here on YouTube. Specifically, those legendary members who financially help to support me so I can continue doing this as my full-time job and my main source of income. And I'll see you for our next cosplay tutorial. Much love, guys!